Okay, well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's word study video. I don't know if I like this or not. This is my first video with this new camera, and it's sitting right on top of my laptop here, and there's too much of me. But anyway, if you will pardon that, let me go ahead and uh, see if I can't rectify that situation by starting my screen share and making myself smaller. Let's start with the contact information here. Okay. Uh, Let me move myself over here. It's been a while, folks. So let me try to get back into how to do all this. But anyway, this is my first video with this new camera. I have to learn to stay away from it, sit back like this. This is my contact information. If you guys, anybody wants to contact me for example, PDF transcript of these notes that I put together for these videos, you can send me an email, allbelieversneedtorah@protonmail.com, request the transcript. Just let me know the title or the date that the video was posted, and I will send you a PDF. You can also get on the mailing list for the weekly Torah portions that I will send to your email box every week. I post every week. I do a general post on either my Facebook pages, which I have two, or my. I can't do it. No, I can't do it on my YouTube channel. Only on my two Facebook groups. But anyway, if you want to get on a mailing list and have the tour portion sent to your email box, you are welcome to do so. Facebook groups. If you are watching this video on my YouTube channel and you want to join my Facebook group, I have two groups. Like I said, I recommend that you join Christians Today Need Torah because that's a public group. Right now we have 20,400 members. I recommend you join that group. And the reason I recommend that, if you're watching this on YouTube, is on YouTube, you're not going to have fellowship with like-minded believers. Uh, Whereas on Facebook, on this group in Facebook, you will have opportunity for fellowship with like-minded believers there. Uh, or you can join my original Facebook group, All Believers Need Torah, but that's a private group. I'm not saying I know what I'm doing right now, but when I started All Believers Need Torah, I certainly did not know what I was doing. I started it as a private group, not realizing that when people join and start seeing stuff in the group that they would like to share with their family or friends, well, they couldn't do it because it was a private group. So then I started the public group, Christians Today Need Torah. But yeah, all believers need Torah. You're welcome to join there, but you're not able to share anything with your family member and friends. We have 35,500 members there. Uh, that group is down 20,000 members since the last video. And I don't know if people are dropping off in order to join Christians They Need Torah, or they're just dropping off because they're just losing interest. And if that's the case, and they I'm not going to criticize anybody for dropping off. It's just the way it is. Life is life. But yeah, so I've had a 20,000 member drop there, but that's okay. When I started that group, I had one member and that one member was my wife. So we're up to 35,500 members there. I'm really excited about Christians Today Need Torah because that group is growing. We're up to 20,400 members there. I started with one member on that group, in that group as well. So we're up to 20,400 members. Now, keep in mind, I have two administrators that are a huge, huge help to me in maintaining both these pages because it's a lot of work. Uh, and I was requested to make an announcement that if you want to join Christians Today Need Torah, which I recommend, uh, you have to agree to the group rules. Okay. We made group rules to keep our members uh, safe from harassment and from people who all they want to do is argue and belittle them because of their new walk of obedience. So we have group rules, and the only way that you're going to join Christians, they need Torah, or all believers need Torah. The only way you're going to be able to join is to agree to the group rules. Uh, I can't speak for my administrators, but when I am approving or not new member request, I think right now I am approving only maybe 60% of those uh, asking to join, and those 60% are those who have agreed to the group rules. So if you want to join, agree to the group rules and you will be able to join. But if you do not agree to the group rules, you will not be able to join. Okay, it's just that simple. Okay, YouTube channel. I have YouTube channel. We are up to 66 subscribers. I started with one. Uh, so I am hoping that that will grow as well. And but if not, if I just get one new subscriber per week, that's fine. You know, I've learned to be content. Okay, it's in the Father's hands. I have put these memberships and all these pages in the Father's hands. He's the one who put it in my mind to start these groups to begin with. So it's all in his hands. So I have learned in life to be content. So I don't get bothered by the numbers. Recommended Bible version. Okay, some folks have asked, you know, what Bible version do I recommend? I recommend this Bible version right here. I've showed this several times. It's called the Scriptures. This is a paperback Bible. I've been using this one, as you can tell. I've been using this one as my daily Bible for 12 years now, since I've started this walk of faith and obedience. So I recommend this, okay, Scriptures, and you can find this at ISR dot messianic or ISR dash messianic.org. And I've always talked about this, but I've never been able to show it. I've got this as a special Bible, and I'll tell you why here in a minute. But I keep this Bible in a Bible cover. This Bible cover was gifted to me by my friends in Colorado, Gene and Marner Campbell. So thank you, Gene and Marner. I've had this for several years now, but I keep this special Bible in it. Okay. Now, uh, I've told you guys before that I'm 68. 4 months away from being 69. When I was, I think, 14 years old, along with my stepsister and stepbrother, we were gifted by my parents, by our parents, this King James Bible. Okay. And I'll try to get it to where the camera can pick it up. But this is I have my last name right there on the bottom. It's faded out. But this is the Bible that was gifted to me when I was 14 years old. Around 14, I don't know. I know I was a young teenager by my parents, and I still have this Bible. And I'm very happy that, in fact, the pages are turning yellow. Uh, I I don't get into this very much because I have so many Bibles on my computer here, and plus my daily reader is my blue paperback, The Scriptures. But I just wanted to show you guys that I still have this Bible. I can't speak uh, about my stepbrother and sister if they still have their Bibles, but I have mine. And I I live here in the Philippines, so it made it with me here to the Philippines. I had Oh, that's a long story. I don't want to get into it, but I lost a lot of Bibles in my move here. Uh, but I'm very happy and thankful that I didn't lose that one or my scriptures. Uh, so anyway, okay, what else do we have? Okay, eSword.net, and theword.net. Okay, these are free Bible programs that I use on this laptop right here. Okay, so these are free, eSword.net and excuse me, and theword.net. And I highly recommend these. I I'm not a I'm retired on a fixed income. So I try to get by with spending at the least amount of money as possible. So that's why I recommend these programs, because they're free and they're great. Uh, I use them extensively. Okay, now great audio Bible resource. Why did I put this? Well, uh, I I I have a reading plan. It's called Grandpa Gene's Bible Reading Plan. Okay, a friend of mine, Grandpa Gene, put this reading plan together, and he sent it to me, and I looked it over, and I thought, well, this is pretty good. Now it's aggressive. This Grandpa Gene's Bible reading plan is aggressive. Okay, we read what is it? 42 chapters per week, every week. And that don't count the Torah portions that I read every week as well. But with this Grandpa Gene's Bible reading plan, we go through 42 chapters a week. And we, at that pace, we go through the Bible almost 2 times a year. Okay, but I highly recommend it. And the thing that I've learned to do to help me get through the 42 chapters a week is I go to YouTube, and I go to Scorby U Bible, or YouTube/@Scorby U Bible, and I'll click on his YouTube uh, channel, and it's a wonderful way to get through a lot of Bible reading, because he will read from the King James version as the text is on the screen. So I can follow right along, and it's just a very delightful way of getting through a lot of Bible reading. I really enjoy it, so I highly recommend that. Uh, and the reason that I searched uh, him out, of course, he's been, gone for I don't know how long, but it's been a while. But back in my younger days, uh, when I was an over the road truck driver, semi driver over the road, well, I worked nights, and back in the day, I had a big catalog of cassette tapes of Alexander Scorby's The Complete King James Bible. And I always enjoyed listening. He just had that voice, like a Paul Harvey type of voice that you just really, it was just pleasant to the ears to listen to his voice. But anyway, so I searched him out, and I use his YouTube channel to have the Bible read to me as I follow along in the King James version text on the screen. So that's why I recommend that. Okay, well, enough of that. Let me go ahead and stop that screen share and get right into today's uh, word study. What did I do? The same thing again? Okay. Pardon me, folks. Like I said, it's been a while since I have done this. And let me see here. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so the title, you can't see it. Let me shrink myself up a little bit here. Are all things really lawful? Okay, that's the title for today's teaching. Okay, most of us who were raised in lawless churchianity were taught that when Paul stated in 1 Corinthians 10:23 that all things are lawful, that this means that he was saying that new covenant Christians are allowed to violate the food laws that were put in place by the Father in Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14. Okay, so that was just the first thing that came to my mind, or our mind. I should only speak about me. This is what I was taught to think that verse is saying. All things are lawful. Well, I was taught to believe. I was raised, for those of you that don't know, I was raised in the United Pentecostal Church. Uh, and this is just what I remember being taught, that when we read these words in this particular verse, that all things are lawful, that was a green light for me to eat my pork, you know. Uh, but we're going to get into that today. Is that what Paul really meant to say? Okay, but to follow the logic that when Paul said all things are lawful, that it was okay to violate the Father's food laws. To follow that logic, Paul would also be saying that Christians are allowed to murder, lie, cheat, and steal as well. After all things are lawful, right? Now, does anyone in their right mind really believe that Paul's saying this? I, I don't think so. I don't think anybody in their right mind could be thinking that Paul is saying this. So why would people believe that Paul is saying that Christians are allowed, new covenant Christians are allowed to commit sin by violating the Father's food laws? Folks, you have to pardon me. I received this sinus infection. So my throat is scratchy and I may be sniffling and coughing and stuff. So you just have to pardon me. I'm on the mend. Uh, so I've still got lung congestion and sinus, just the whole gamut. But anyway, I'm on the mend. Paul's letter on the topic of idol worship were written to a specific group of people, a specific group of people. Okay, the recipients of his letters were folks living in a culture that was surrounded by idol worship. Okay, idol temples, animal sacrifices to these idols. Okay, this was a common occurrence. This was just something that was everyday life. We don't have that. I mean, you know, we got people, bowing down to idols, but we don't have, at least here in the Philippines where I live, uh, we don't have people sacrificing animals to idols. I can't speak for India or Thailand or, places like that, even though I've been to Thailand and really enjoyed my visit there with my wife. Uh, I don't believe that they're sacrificing animals to idols there. They have a lot of idol temples, but Paul, he is writing to a specific group of people that is so different than today's culture. Okay. So they were surrounded by this stuff. And this is not the culture that we live in. But yet, many believers today have taken this passage out of context and have tried to apply it to their lives in order to justify their disobedience of the Father's food laws. Okay, 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 23. This is where Paul says, he says it in another uh, chapter, I think chapter 6 of First Corinthians. He mentions this uh, phrase, all things are lawful for me. But the context of chapter 6, I think, is primarily about sexual immorality. There's a lot of shenanigans going on that uh, I'm not going to address today because I don't need to. What I want to focus on is this chapter 10 passage. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but not all things edify. Okay, I always took that as that we have the freedom to do what we want, right? I mean, we are human beings and we have a free will choice to do whatever we want. If I'm up on the second floor of my apartment and I have a outdoor patio out here, well, if I want to, I can just take a nosedive out into the street off this second story uh, open air patio I have out here. I'm free to do that. But uh, I'm not going to do that because that's stupid. Uh, so that's the way I always took this verse. But there's more to it than that. So since we know that Paul is not going to go against the Father's instructions in the Torah by saying that new covenant believers can just go out and do whatever they want because all things are lawful. We really need to do more than a surface level reading of Scripture while applying some common sense in order to understand what Paul is really saying. Lawless Christians, and these are believers that refuse to walk in obedience to the Father's Torah, to the Father's law, to his rules. They refuse to conduct themselves in a way that the Father wants his people to conduct themselves. Lawless Christians, they don't want any part of that. Lawless Christians have a deep-seated obsession with eating swine's flesh. So when they read this passage, and this is how I was taught to read it, in their blindness, and I was blind, all they can see is Paul giving them a green light to eat swine. And nobody ate more swine than I did. But I was blind, okay? I was not able to see the truth back then. So I was taught that when I read where Paul is saying all things are lawful, I was taught to believe that he's saying that, we could eat our swine, our pork. But this, of course, is not what Paul is saying, because he was fully aware of what the prophet Yeshayahu, we know him as Isaiah, stated in chapter 65, verses 2 through 7, and chapter 66, 16, and 17, which is that the swine eaters, the pork eaters, are going to be destroyed. All of them. All of them. It doesn't matter if they're out in the world or if they're in the Christian church. If they are swine eaters, the Father says through the prophet Yeshayahu, Isaiah, that he is going to destroy them. And of course, we see this in action and confirmed by Messiah Yeshua in Matthew 7, verses 21 through 23, and Matthew 13, verses 41 and 42. And this is why I think, because I mentioned pork or swine, and I got a lot of people mad at me, man, because, a lot of people, a lot of believers, you mention swine or pork to these people and they will go off on you. And that's what happened to me this past week, just a few days ago. I mean, you mentioned swine, man, it's like, for some of these people claiming to be believers, you mention swine, it's like stirring up a hornet's nest with these people. But facts are facts, man. If swine, see, and I wrote a post this morning, about idol worship. When we make something our idol, this is something that we don't want to give up, okay? I have known people, and I don't know if I put this in my notes or not, but I have known people, and I know people today who are willing to be rejected and spend eternity in the lake of fire all for uh all for keeping their pork or their swine into their daily dietary needs. I like I said, I've known people and I know people today that they are willing to spend eternity in the lake of fire all for pork because they do not and will not give up their pork, which is unfortunate. Uh, Back in the day, man, nobody ate more pork than I did because I was raised in the family, a Christian family, uh, where we ate pork all the time. And I loved it, man. There ain't nothing tastes better than pork. There ain't nothing smells better than pork when it's being fried, put in a fry pan or, in the oven. There ain't nothing. Listen, pork is meat candy. That's what it is. It's meat candy. And I love pork and I love the smell of pork, but I don't eat pork anymore because when the Father brought me out of all that darkness and I read with clear eyes and understanding the Father's food laws in Leviticus chapter 11 and Deuteronomy chapter 14, I made the decision that I was going to obey the Father. So I haven't touched pork. Knowingly, I have not touched pork in over 12 years. I've got people watching this video right now that can say the same thing, except they haven't knowingly eaten pork for 20 years. So when Paul says all things are lawful, he's not saying that we can eat pork, because if Paul was saying that, then he would be going against the Father's food laws in the Torah, and Paul is simply not going to do that. Okay, a faithful version does a really good job at bringing clarity to this passage. So we read this passage from the King James up here, right? Or the New King James. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but not all things edify. Okay, down here in a faithful version, it reads like this: all things that are lawful are permitted to me, but not all things that are permitted are profitable. All things that are lawful are permitted to me, but all things that are permitted do not edify. Okay, I love that. I love that rendering of that passage because it says all things that are lawful. Okay, consuming swine is not lawful. It is a sin, actually. Yes, it is. I had somebody mention to me, I think yesterday, that this is not a salvation issue. Well, I wrote back that, I beg to differ, but respectfully, I must say that it is a salvation issue, because when somebody understands and realizes that the Father has prohibited the consumption of swine and we consume swine anyway, knowing that there's a prohibition against it, that is willful sin. Okay. 1 John 3:4. Okay, this is a passage that I cannot remember ever being read to me or taught to me or discussed with me when I was growing up in the United Pentecostal Church, and I spent decades in the church, I cannot remember this passage ever crossing the lips of anybody. 1 John 3:4, where the apostle Yohanan, that's his Hebrew name, Yohanan, he states that sin is the transgression and the violation of the law of Moses, what we call the Torah. Torah means instruction. The Torah came from the Father. Torah means instruction. So the instructions of the Father is Torah. But I cannot ever remember 1 John 3:4 ever crossing the lips of anybody. Nobody in my family, nobody in the church that I went to. And I just want to add that going to church, I thank my mom and dad for raising me in the church, because, looking back on my life, looking back on my life, like I said, in a few months, I'll be 69 years old. Looking back on my life, those years that I spent growing up in the UPC were some of the most enjoyable years of my life. But that being said, we were not walking in truth, because we were not being taught the truth. Okay. But 1 John 3:4, Yohanan says that sin is the transgression of the Torah, of the law of Moses. That's what sin is. So when we know that there is a prohibition in the Torah, Leviticus 11, Deuteronomy 14, against eating swine's flesh, and we do it anyway because that's our idol. Swine is our idol. We've made swine our idol, and we don't want to give up our idol. Well, those people are not going to enter into the kingdom of heaven, because I've taught on this before, and I probably need to do it again. When we know about the prohibition, and I'm sorry, I'm getting so close to the camera. When we know that I guess, I don't know why I'm doing it. I guess it's more comfortable for me. When we know that there's a prohibition against doing something and we do it anyway because we don't want to give it up, that's an idol. Okay. And willful sin, willful deliberate sin, which is willful deliberate transgression and violation of the Torah, the Father did not provide a mechanism for forgiveness of that type of sin. He did not provide, what's the right word? He did not provide a way to be forgiven. Okay. When he sent his son to shed his blood and to give up his life to pay our sin penalty, that was for our sins that we did in the past that were done by mistake. We didn't realize we were committing sin when we lived out in the world and doing all kinds of things that was in transgression of the Torah. We didn't know what we were doing. These are sins by mistake. And the Father has provided a way to be forgiven of those types of sins. Now, once we are forgiven of those types of sins, and then we continue to do those same things, like eating pork, for example, that is in clear violation of the Torah, the Father did not provide any forgiveness for that type of sin. Willful, deliberate sin, willful, deliberate transgression of the Father's food laws. If we pass away, if we depart these mortal bodies and we die the first death with willful and deliberate sin on our record, we're not going to enter into the kingdom of heaven, folks. That's just the hard truth. I know that a lot of you don't like hearing that, but it is the truth. That's what Scripture says. Okay. So let's get back into it. I'm getting off the path here of trying to get through this video. I don't want to take up too much of your time here. Okay. All things that are lawful are permitted to me, but not all things that are permitted are profitable. You'll find out that Paul is talking about clean, lawful meat that may have been slaughtered for the purpose of idol sacrifices. Okay. I don't know if I'm going to get through this video or not, man. My voice is almost gone. All things that are lawful are permitted to me, but all things that are permitted do not edify. Let no one seek that which benefits himself, but let each seek what benefits the other. That's the second part of the royal law. Okay, love your neighbor as yourself. Every lawful thing that is sold in the market you may eat. Okay, every clean beast, every clean animal of let me see, I saw this the other day, and I'm not going to say this right, but it's the word rudiment or something like that. Anyway, a rudiment animal. I'm not saying that right. I should have wrote that down. But it is of any animal of, I guess, the bovine oh, category of animals, like a cow, an elk, a deer. Uh, what else? Sheep, goats. Uh, Basically, these are animals that have a cloven foot, like this, a cloven foot, and they chew the cud. Those two are essential. If those animals have a cloven foot and chew the cud, then they are permitted by the Father for us to eat. Okay, so that is what Paul is talking about. Every lawful thing. That's talking about, like I said, bovine, uh, category of animals, cows. I don't know what kind of animals they had back in the day there. I don't think they had elk. I don't think they had deer. But they certainly had cows, and they had goats, and they had sheep. Those are lawful things that is sold in the market you may eat without asking questions. Paul's saying, go to the meat market, and anything that is lawful, anything that is clean, cow, sheep, goat, you are permitted to eat those. So go ahead, when you go to the meat market, go there and buy those things, but don't be asking a bunch of questions. You don't need to. You don't need to ask questions. Okay. Without asking questions. Okay. So what is Paul saying there? Without asking questions. Okay. For the sake of conscience. For the earth and all its fullness is the Lord's. Okay. So what is Paul saying here without asking questions? Well, he's saying that they didn't need to go to the market and start asking this vendor, because this vendor probably didn't know the answer to the questions. But Paul is saying, don't be asking the vendors if these lawful clean animals, if these were slaughtered for the purpose of idol sacrifice. Paul is saying, don't worry about that. Don't be asking them no questions. Okay. It's lawful for you to eat. So just buy the meat and don't worry about asking questions. Now, if an unbelieving person, this would be a Gentile. Now, if an unbelieving person invites you for a meal, somebody invites you over for dinner for, a meal, and you desire to go, eat off, eat all the lawful things that are set before you without asking questions for the sake of conscience. So Paul is saying that when you go to if somebody invites you to their house, well, you don't need to be interrogating them on where this clean, lawful meat came from. Paul's saying don't do that. Just eat the lawful things that are set before you without asking questions. See, here we go again. Paul's saying don't be asking a bunch of questions, okay? There's no need. But if anyone says to you, another guest perhaps, if anyone says to you, this has been offered to an idol, do not eat it. Okay, do not eat it. For the sake and the conscience of the one who showed it to you. Okay, you don't need to, your conscience, you don't need to be worried about your conscience, because we're going to get into it, so I don't want to get ahead of myself, which I'm doing anyway. Paul is saying that an idol is nothing, and sacrifice to an idol is nothing. But for the sake of the conscience of the person who is with you as a guest at this meal, if this person tells you, oh man, this meat's been sacrificed to an idol, well, don't eat the meat. Don't eat it, because not for your conscience do you need to refrain from eating it, but for the conscience of the person who is with you at this meal, who has pointed out the fact that this meat has been offered to an idol. So don't harm their conscience. Don't offend them. Okay. It's Paul saying it's okay to eat this as long as someone has not pointed out to you that it has been offered to an idol. Because when they informed you that this meat was offered to an idol, this means that they themselves think that it is wrong to eat this meat. Okay. So even though we know that an idol is nothing, and that a sacrifice to an idol is nothing, for the sake of the conscience of that person, we do not eat that meat. Do not eat it, Paul says, for the sake and the conscience of the one who showed it to you. For the earth and all its fullness is the Lord's. But conscience, I say, not your own. You know the truth, okay? An idol is nothing. It's just either plaster or it's wood. It's nothing. Not your own, but that of the other person, okay? For why is my freedom judged by another person's conscience? Okay. Now, Paul's getting pretty deep here, okay? And I've told you guys before that you cannot understand Paul from the perspective that the law of Moses has been abolished, because Paul did not have that same perspective. So he's going to be saying stuff that is hard to understand, especially for those who do not have the same perspective that Paul had. So Paul is saying, so why is my freedom judged by another person's conscience? Well, his freedom is that the idol is nothing and that animal sacrifices to idols are nothing, because the idol is nothing. But the other person may think that there's, something to the idols, and they know based on their thinking that the idol is something, that any meat that's sacrificed to that idol, it's wrong to eat it. So that's the other person's conscience, okay? But Paul's saying, why is my freedom judged by another person's conscience? Well, it's because of the royal law, okay? The royal law is to love your neighbor as yourself, okay? Don't do anything that's going to offend that other person's conscience. And if I partake with thankfulness to Elohim, why am I spoken evil of for eating that for which I give thanks? Okay. So again, I think Paul is referring to the fact that he knows that the idol is nothing and that meat sacrificed to an idol is nothing. And that in his conscience, he gives thanks to the Father for this meat that is undefiled. Why am I evil spoken of for eating that which I give thanks? Okay, somebody who thinks that it's wrong to eat the meat, the clean, lawful meat that was sacrificed to an idol, if they see Paul eating that meat, then they'll speak evil of him, because in their conscience, in their frame of mind, it was wrong for him to eat that meat because it was sacrificed to an idol. Therefore, whether you eat or you drink or you do anything, do all things to the glory of Elohim. Be without offense to both Jews and Greeks, and to the ecclesia of Elohim, according as I also seek to please everyone in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of many, in order that they may be saved. Okay, so after reading the entire passage, it becomes clear that Paul is talking about clean meat, permissible meat, lawful meat being offered for sale at the meat markets that may have been slaughtered for idol sacrifices. We don't know that for sure, when the folks went to the meat market, they were just looking at the meat. Okay. So let's look at this passage again. Okay. So, yeah, I should have just read earlier. I should have just read all the way through it. But I pick it apart here. I elaborate. I explain what's going on here. All things that are lawful are permitted to me, but not all things that are permitted are profitable. All things that are permitted to me, all things that are lawful are permitted to me, but all things that are permitted do not edify. Okay, that's what Paul is saying. I don't want to be overly redundant here, but Paul is basically saying that it's lawful for him to eat clean meat that may have been used in animal sacrifices to an idol. It's okay to eat that meat as long as you do not offend anyone else by eating that meat. All things that are lawful are permitted to me, clean meat that may have been sacrificed to an idol, but all things that are permitted do not edify. Okay, we're not going to build up the faith of a weak brother or sister if they are at that meal and they think it's wrong to eat the meat that has been known was known to have been sacrificed to an idol. It don't edify that person if we go ahead and eat that meat, because we know the truth. We know that an idol is nothing, and that meat sacrificed to that idol is nothing. Okay, it's not defiled. Let no one seek that which benefits himself, but let each seek that which benefits the other. Okay, that's the royal law. Love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, verse 24 above is referring to the royal law. James 2:8. If, however, this is what's his Hebrew name? Yaakov. Okay. Some people say Yaakov, some people say Yaakov. Okay. But that's his Hebrew name. Okay. We know him as James, but nobody ever called him James. If, however, you fulfill the royal law according to Scripture, which is found in Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 18, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. You do well. Okay, so that's what Paul is talking about here in verse 24. He's talking about the royal law. Love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, Paul goes on, verse 25. Every lawful thing that is sold in the market you may eat without asking questions for the sake of conscience. Why would Paul add without asking questions? As with any open air meat markets today, my wife was at an open air meat market this morning buying chicken. We live here in the Philippines. Open air meat markets are the common way here in the Philippines that people go to buy their meat. Okay. People here in the Philippines, just like back in the day of Paul, many people here in the Philippines do not have refrigerators. So the women go to the meat markets every morning. My wife goes every morning to the meat markets, and she will buy her fresh meat, her fresh vegetables, every morning at the meat markets, open air. Okay, open air. That's just normal way of life here in the Philippines. As with any open air meat markets today, the meats would have been separated, and this is true. Uh, you go down to the meat markets here in the Philippines, you will have your beef, you will have your pork, you will have your chicken. These meats are separated out because of the price differences. Okay, beef is going to be more expensive than the pork. And those prices are different than the prices for chicken. It's just the way it is, man. It is just the way it is at meat markets. As with any open air meat markets today, the meats would have been separated out due to price differences. A pound of pork, for example, would be less than a pound of beef. Paul is saying that when they would come to the lawful meat section of that particular meat market, that is to say, the clean meat, Paul is saying they need not bother asking the vendor, the seller, if the meat had been offered for idol sacrifices or not. Paul's saying don't worry about asking whether the meat has been offered to idols or not. It makes no difference. Idols are nothing. For the earth and all its fullness is the Lord's, the Master's. Now, if an unbelieving person, a Greek, Gentile, invites you for a meal and you desire to go, eat all the lawful things that are set before you without asking the you're the guest, okay? That person is the what do you call it? Anyway, Paul is saying when you go, you're a guest, okay? Don't be asking the person who invited you a bunch of questions about the meat. If it's lawful, eat it. If it's clean meat, eat it. Don't be asking no questions. Again, Paul is saying that the guest need not bother the host. That's the word I was trying to. I couldn't get it out of my noggin there. Paul is saying that the guests need not. Now you guys know why I read these notes. I put these notes together. I spend days on these things. Paul is saying that the guests need not bother the host by asking them if the lawful meat had been slaughtered for animal sacrifices. It is foolish to think that someone is going to invite a known Jew over to their house for a meal and set before them swine's flesh. So many believers, when they read things, well, up here in the King James, I didn't do the whole thing in the King James, but when they read in the King James where Paul is saying, eat all things that are set before you, well, in their mind, Paul's saying, if they set a pork roast before you, go ahead and eat it. Don't ask no questions. Go ahead and eat it. Don't worry about it. All things are lawful. But it is foolish to think that someone is going to invite a known Jew over to their house for a meal and set before them swine's flesh, pork roast, or pork chops. It's foolishness. But yet that's what I was taught to believe. But it's foolishness. That's like someone in our day and age today inviting a friend over to the house knowing full well that they were vegetarians and serving them T-bone steaks. That's in my mind, that's the equivalent. Okay, if I'm going to If my wife and I are going to invite friends or family members over to the house for a meal, and we know that they are vegetarians, my wife ain't going to fix them a bunch of T-bone steaks or ribeyes or pot roast. No, my wife will fix a very nice vegetarian meal. So it's foolish when people read in the King James Version where Paul says, whatever is set before you, go ahead and eat, that's a green light that Paul is saying that they have a green light to eat pork. Well, that's just pure foolishness, folks. But if anyone also in attendance says to you, this has been offered to an idol, do not eat it for the sake and the conscience of the one also in attendance who showed it to you. For the earth and all its fullness is the master's. But conscience, I say, not my own, because I know that idol is nothing. Anything offered to that idol is nothing. But conscience, I say, not my own, because I know the truth, but that of the other person. For why is my freedom to eat lawful meat that may have been slaughtered for animal sacrifices be judged by another person's conscience? And if I partake with thankfulness to Elohim, why am I evil spoken of, or why am I spoken evil of for eating that which I give thanks? Okay. So to alleviate that, because Paul has the freedom, he knows the truth that idol is nothing, that he can give thanks to the Father for this clean meat, for this meal. He is free to do that. But if someone sees him doing that when they think that it's wrong to do it, well, then they're going to be wagging their tongue about Paul. So Paul is just going to alleviate all that, and he's not going to eat it, okay? He's going to refrain. He's going to refrain. Many believers are taught that as long as they give thanks. Now, this is the truth, man. I have seen this. I was raised in this situation. Many believers are taught that as long as they give thanks for a meal consisting of swine's flesh, that, oh, I'm going to have trouble. I should not have put that word in there. That their giving of thanks transforms that unclean meat into clean meat. Okay? They think that their giving of thanks over breakfast sausage, and I've sat in on so many meals at cafes with Christians, pork eating Christians, who would give thanks over this pork, thinking that they're giving thanks makes that unclean meat clean. It's like, a miracle. Well, it's foolishness. But they base this belief on 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 4 through 5. But when reading this, I don't know if I have this passage in here or not. I don't think I put it in here. Okay, I didn't put it in here. Okay, let me where was I at? First Timothy. Did I go past it already? Let me get over here. No, I didn't go past it. I just didn't go up far enough. Yeah, here we go, right here. Okay, First Timothy. They base this belief on First Timothy 4, chapter 4 and 4 through 5. But when reading this passage, it is revealed that this passage is not talking about unclean meats, because the flesh of swine, let me correct that. I didn't catch this on my spell checker. Okay. Because the flesh of swine is not sanctified by the word of Elohim. Okay, we're going to read First Timothy chapter 4. Now I was going to highlight. Okay, the flesh of swine. That's pork. We highlight that in a different color. The flesh of swine is not sanctified by the word of Elohim. Okay, let's go this. First Timothy 4, 4 through 5. Let me go there now. Okay, First Timothy, I keep moving myself around. First Timothy 4, 4 through 5. Where is First Timothy 4, 4 through 5? Okay, let me get myself way up here. Okay, now, okay. Now this is what I was raised into believing. And I have, like I said, I have been to so many meals, breakfast meals at cafes with pork eating Christians. They believe, based on this passage right here, for every creature of God is good, and nothing. What version is this? Uh, it's not important. Every creature of God, I'm probably New King James. For every creature of God is good, and nothing is to be refused if it is received with thanksgiving. For it is sanctified by the word of God and prayer. Okay, so when a Christian reads this, nothing is to be refused if it is received with thanksgiving. They believe that they could pray over that pork sausage or over that bacon over their breakfast, and that all of a sudden it's acceptable to eat. I was raised watching that, believing in that, and doing it myself. But this is the key phrase, right? This is the key phrase right here. For it is sanctified by the word of Elohim. Okay. Nowhere in Scripture, folks, nowhere in Scripture are you going to find pork, swine, or the shellfish category of uh, meat sanctified by the word of God. It's not. It's not in there. Pork And shrimp, lobster tail, clams, clam chowder, oysters. Uh, if you live here in the Philippines, octopus, eel. Uh, none of that is sanctified by the word of Elohim. You will not find it because it is not there. So when Christians, when they, oh, let me go back to or to share. So when Christians think that they can pray over their pork and it makes it clean, it don't work that way, folks. Therefore, whether you eat or you drink or you do anything, do all things to the glory of Elohim. One of the many reasons that Paul, his Hebrew name is Shaul, one of the many reasons that Paul is not talking about swine or pork, it is this passage, is because eating swine does not bring glory to the Father. You do not bring glory to the Father when you are transgressing, violating, and breaking his instructions, his food laws. That does not bring glory to the Father. Due to the fact that okay, let me read this again. One of the many reasons that Shaul is not talking about swine or pork in this passage is because eating pork does not bring glory to Elohim, to the Father, due to the fact that he, the Father, Elohim, has forbidden us to eat it. Okay? Leviticus chapter 11 and Deuteronomy 14. How can violating the food laws of the Father bring glory to him? It doesn't. Okay, Paul goes on, verse 32 of what is it, 1 Corinthians 10. Be without offense to both Jews and Greeks and to the ecclesia of Elohim. Eating swine would be offensive to a Jew, and eating lawful meat that was involved in animal sacrifices or may have been involved in animal sacrifices would be offensive to a Greek or a Gentile who thought it wrong to eat such meat. So don't offend anyone. According as I also seek to please everyone in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of many, in order that they may be saved. Another reason that we know that Shaul is not talking about the eating of swine or pork, but of clean, lawful meat that may have been slaughtered for an animal sacrifice, is when we consider the previous parts of his letter. Now we're going to jump back a few chapters from chapter 10. We're going to jump back to chapter 8. Now concerning idol sacrifices, we know that we have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. Okay, we may have knowledge, but don't let that knowledge cause you to get a big head. Okay, don't allow yourselves to be puffed up by this knowledge. If anyone thinks that he knows anything, he doesn't yet know as he ought to know. But But if anyone loves Elohim, he is known by him. Okay. If anyone loves Elohim, we express our love to him by our obedience. Okay. Our obedience is the expression of our love for the Father. Therefore, concerning the eating of animal sacrifices, we know that an idol is nothing in the world. It is nothing. It is either cement, plaster, or wood, or whatever else they can come up with. It is nothing, and that there is no Elohim but one. But even if there are so-called gods or so-called Elohims with a small e, whether in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many Elohims and many lords. Okay, that should be okay. I'm just I should have put masters, small m. Yet for us there is one Elohim, the Father, from whom are all things, and we exist for him, and one Master, Yeshua the Messiah, through whom are all things, and we exist through Messiah Yeshua. But that knowledge is not in but that knowledge is not in everyone. Some, so accustomed to idols up until now, eat food at an animal sacrifice, and their conscience, being weak, is defiled. But food, anything deemed unclean by the Father, is not to be considered food. Okay, that's something that people really need to get a grip on. Anything that has been deemed to be unclean by the Father is not to be considered food. It is not food. Anything deemed unclean by the Father is not to be considered food. Okay, it is not food. Okay, it is not food. We are not to consider it food because it's not food. But food will not bring us before Elohim. We are not worse off if we do eat, and no better off if we. Hmm? We are no worse off if we do not eat, and no better off if we do eat. This is referring to meat that may have been slaughtered for animal sacrifices. Okay, this is not talking about pork. This is not talking about swine. Paul is referring to meat, staying within the context, okay? Paul is referring to meat that may have been offered in an idol sacrifice. But watch out that this freedom of yours, this knowledge of yours that an idol is nothing, but watch out that this freedom of yours to eat meat that may have been sacrificed to an idol, clean meat, lawful meat that may have been sacrificed to an idol, but watch out that this freedom of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block to the weak. Okay, this freedom of ours or this freedom of theirs. Okay, because this is addressing the society and the culture that Paul was living in. This freedom of yours to eat it's lawful to eat meat, clean meat that may have been involved in an animal sacrifice and then dumped onto the meat market to be sold. Let not that freedom of yours that we do not become a stumbling block to the weak, to somebody who thinks it is wrong to eat that meat. For suppose someone sees you who have this knowledge that idols are nothing, dining in an idol's temple. If his conscience is weak, won't he be emboldened to eat idol sacrifices when he thinks that it is wrong to do so? For the one who is weak is destroyed by your knowledge that idols are nothing. The brother for whom Messiah died. In this way, when you sin against the brothers and sisters and wound their conscience, when it is weak, you sin against Messiah. Pardon me, folks. For this reason, if food causes my brother to stumble, I will never eat meat that may have been slaughtered for an idol sacrifice again, so that I do not cause my brother, who thinks that it is wrong to eat such meat, to stumble. Okay, back to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. What am I saying then? What is Paul saying? What am I saying then? That an animal sacrifice is anything? Or that an idol is anything? No. What I'm saying, Paul says, what I'm saying is that what the pagans sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to Elohim. And I don't want you to become partakers with demons. You cannot drink the cup of, oh, I hate using that word. Every time I see that word, I think about the House of Lords in London. Oh. You cannot drink the cup of the master and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the table of the master and the table of demons. Okay, Paul is saying here, and folks, you'll have to excuse me because sometimes when I go through this stuff, I have to what I call clean house on stuff that I skipped over inadvertently. Paul is saying here that even though with the knowledge that idols are nothing and that idol sacrifices are nothing, those with this knowledge should not be dining in an idol's temple. Yaakov, we know him as James, had this to say on the topic. Acts chapter 15, verses 20 through 21. But that we write to them, the Gentiles, these were new Gentiles who were coming into the faith, after Peter's sheet vision of Acts 10. But we write to them, the Gentiles, to abstain from things polluted by idols, from sexual immorality, from things strangled, and from blood. For from generations of old, Moses has had in every city those who proclaim him. This is referencing the Torah, referring to the Torah in the synagogues being read every Sabbath day. So what Yaakov is saying here is that these new Gentiles, these are new baby believers, that they were to abstain from anything polluted by idols, okay? Because these were baby believers. They were just now coming into the faith. They didn't have the knowledge that Paul had. But Jacob is telling these folks, these Gentiles, well, he's telling the folks that were ministering to these Gentiles that they were to abstain from things polluted by idols, sexual immorality, things strangled. Uh, the blood was in the meat. The meat, the meat needs to be bled out, okay? And from blood, they were not to eat blood. Here in the Philippines, they eat blood, okay? So Jacob is saying these four things they need to immediately stop doing. This would allow them to then enter into the synagogue because the the people in the synagogue, they were not going to allow these new Gentiles into the synagogue if they knew that they were messing around with animal sacrifice or idol sacrifices, if they were committing sexual immorality. I mean, that stuff was going on all over the place back then. From things strangled, from animals that had been strangled instead of bled out, and from eating blood. For from generations of old, Yaakov is saying, for from generations of old, the Torah is proclaimed in the synagogues in the cities that these Gentiles live in. Okay. So these Gentiles, they were, after they stopped doing these immediate forced things, then they were allowed to come into the synagogue where they would hear the Torah being read, hear the Torah taught, and learn the Torah, slowly learn the Torah in order for them to be able to walk in obedience to the Torah. That was the goal. Okay. So from generations of old, Moses, meaning the Torah. Now, what happened to me? I just had my. Okay, am I back? Okay, I'm back. Okay, folks, I don't know what happened there, but I was booted off. Uh, let's go ahead and get back into it if I can find where I was before. Okay. Okay, I don't know why I was booted off, but I was, and hopefully when this thing comes out, everything okay. But okay. Yeah. Man, that messed me up. I was on a roll there and I was booted off. And my mojo's been all messed up now. Oh yeah, yeah. I was talking about the fact that these new Gentiles, once they stopped doing these four things, they were then allowed to come into the synagogue where they could learn the Torah in order to walk in obedience to it. And we find that in Acts chapter 13 and Acts chapter 15. Okay, and then Jacob or James goes on to say in verse 29 of chapter 15 of Acts that you abstain from things offered to idols. So Jacob is writing to the folks that are overseeing these new Gentiles that they need to abstain from meats that have been offered to idols. From blood, don't eat the blood. From things strangled, don't eat meat that's got the blood in it that hasn't been bled out, and from sexual immorality. If you keep yourselves from these, you do well. These were the first four steps. Once the Gentiles immediately stopped doing these first four things, then they were allowed to come into the synagogues where they would learn the Torah slowly at a slow pace in order to start walking in obedience to it. Okay, but concerning the Gentiles who believe, we have written and decided that they should observe no such thing except they keep themselves from things offered to idols, from blood, from things strangled, and for sexual immorality. So 4 times Yaakov lists these 4 things that the Gentiles needed to cease and desist doing right away. First things first, they needed to stop doing these things. Then they would come and be allowed to come to the synagogues to learn the Torah in order to walk in obedience to it. But what is Yaakov talking about here? We have written and decided that they should observe no such thing. Well, what is that talking about? I think, without taking up too much of your time, more than I've taken up already, I think that that's what that's talking about is the fact that Pharisees had come out of Jerusalem and they were coming in behind Paul and telling the people that Paul had previously ministered to that salvation was not possible unless they first became physically circumcised. I think that's what Yaakov is referring to here. That we did not write anything about them needing to be circumcised as a prerequisite to salvation. Yaakov saying we didn't write nothing about that, but only that they abstain from these first 4 steps. Okay, Yaakov is saying we can get into physical circumcised later. They don't need to be physically circumcised to be saved. So for the believers of his day who, like him, lived in a culture where they were surrounded by blatant idol worship, Paul is saying that it is okay for them to purchase clean, lawful meat at the meat market, but that they were not required to ask the vendor a bunch of questions as to whether or not they were aware if this meat had been slaughtered for an animal sacrifice. Paul's saying, don't worry about it, man. If, on the other hand, they became aware that the meat being sold at the meat market or set before them while they were a guest of someone's home, at someone's home, was purposed for animals for idol sacrifice, they were not to eat it. They were not to eat it in order to not offend that person who pointed that out to them, because that person, for them to point that out, meant that they thought it was wrong to eat that meat, knowing that it was used in idol sacrifices. So that is the word study for today, folks. Christians who think that they can eat pork because Paul said all things are lawful, that's not what Paul was saying, okay? Not even close. The subject of pork was never brought up because it was such an anathema to these folks because they knew it was part of their upbringing. It was part of their psyche. They understood that pork, swine, was and is an abomination because the Father deemed it to be an abomination. So pork was never a part of the conversation. Never, never, never was pork a part of the conversation. But what was a part of the conversation was clean, lawful meat that may or may not have been offered in an idol sacrifice. That was the issue. That was the context. Okay, folks, listen, I sure appreciate you being here. Like I said, this is my first video with this new camera. And I hope that it will turn out okay. I don't know about this glitch, man. I was on a roll there, and all of a sudden, I was kicked off. So we'll see how this turns out. But anyway, I love you guys. I appreciate you being here and watching, and recommend me to your friends and family. Okay, we have to get back that 20,000 member loss that I suffered this week. So anyway, okay. May Yah's blessings and may Yah's shalom be on you and your family and your friends. Okay. So I love you, and we will see you in the next video. Okay. Shalom.